Alright, so today we're going to look at the first run C-Line DD3 from the Italian Plastic, the retooled C-Line DD3 that a worker at Discmania had told me they had reworked from the original one, so it must be different, the new S-Line DD3, and the first run of the Special Blend S-Line that they came out with, the Cloudbreaker 3. And we're going to see how they fly. Alright, so this first hole is 355 feet, and I started off with this, what I'm going to call the first run DD3. On forehand, even though I slipped, there's very little to no turnover on these. Anyone who's thrown them experienced them to be a lot more overstable. Now the first difference you're going to notice with the retooled C-Line is that it'll push out for a lot longer before entering in to the fade part of the flight path, which it still has a really strong fade and a pretty good skip, but just not as aggressive as the first run. And then of course the S-Line, which is what anyone would expect, even on that little bit of anhyzer, you see it holds it for a lot longer and has a bit like wider of a swing. It doesn't have this really sharp turn when it gets into the fade part of the flight path. And then we get into the first set of Cloudbreaker 3s, the Special Blend S-Line. And everyone, again, who's ever thrown these knows, similar to the C-Line, that these were overstable as heck. I don't think they were unusable. I actually liked them a lot, and they have a really good place for me. And so then we get into this hole 2, which is 410 feet downhill with an OB road behind the basket. The first run, I push it out to the right, and you see it has it's never in danger of turning over or pushing straight for too long. And I threw a beat-in first run C-Line on this one, and that one you see after they've been beat in a lot more, they will push out further and then start to swing into that fade part of the flight path. And then knowing the retooled C-Line is a bit straighter, I kind of didn't give it that push out to the right that you normally would want to, but it still has a way wider swinging fade. And then we get into the S-Line, and knowing that one to be more understable than the C-Line, even the retooled C-Line, I didn't give it a whole lot, but even with just a little effort down that hill, it held the same line that the C-Line did, even with less effort. But then we get into the Cloudbreaker 3, knowing it's going to be more stable, yank it out there wider and lower, and again, has a really big fade. And so on hole 3, this one, you'll see the basket here on the left. I was trying to maybe do kind of a tight or wide turnover, but for the C-Line, the first run C-Line, I threw it on this anhyzer angle a little high so it had a lot more time in the air to go through its flight. So it has the stability to come out of it, but this is where you'll see on the same angle, just lower, the retooled C-Line carries that anhyzer angle before swinging out into the fade at the end of the flight path. And you'll see the same exact thing from the S-Line. At that angle, it holds whatever angle you put it on for quite a while and is reliable to almost finish at that angle as long as it's not nose up, and so it never really fights out at the end. Whereas the Special Blend S-Line, Cloudbreaker 3, on pretty much as steep of an angle, this is what the C-Line would have done even if it was a little lower. It follows that line for quite a while, but you see it fight out sooner than the other two fought out of their anhyzer angle. And then we got into this pretty long downhill. You see the basket there on that strip of land. So what I'm trying to do with this is throw any of these straight to an anhyzer angle, let it carry with the grade of the hill, and then finish out at the end. And so the C-Line being pretty overstable to this point, we can see, and you see it never really turns over at all. It just holds that line. It still flexes out, again, off screen there into that little strip of land, which would be inbounds. Knowing that the C-Line, the retooled C-Line, can't handle that much of an angle, I threw this one a lot straighter, and you see it push out straight for a long time and actually drift right. And at the very end, you see it kind of swinging slowly into its fade and then has a really long finish. And so same thing with the S-Line, that one being more understable, threw it on a bit more of a hyzer angle. You watch it flip up and it carries out, but there's not really a big swinging fade at the end. It just kind of finishes straight and has a tiny little skip, not much. And the Cloudbreaker 3, I put it on a lower aggressive anhyzer angle, hoping it would carry with the grade of the hill for quite a while. And you see it does, but just like the C-line, it just fights out into its fade pretty quickly. And then we're going to get into this pretty big hyzer forehand. I swung this first run C-line out. You see it has no problem not turning over, and then it wants to fight, not really swinging across like this, but down, which is not bad. This is my more overstable forehand. And I'll give you an example here. I'll throw the beat-in one. Pushes out for quite a lot longer than the first run that's not super beat-in, and it has way more distance before swinging out into that finish. And then the retooled C-line, same thing as the beat-in one. It pushes out at this angle. You see it kind of hold for a long time, and then near the very tail end swing out. And the S-line, which I didn't know what I did with this color, so I had a gray one with me. I was like, I don't know where I left it, so I just grabbed the gray one. And just like the retooled C-line with this much torque behind it, it just holds a pretty hyzer to straight angle all the way to the tail end of the flight path, and then pushes out right. This Cloudbreaker 3, so you see me put that on a little bit of an forced anhyzer angle, and then it fights back out into a pretty harsh fade at the end. And then this one is down here in this little area, and these bushes make it really hard to want to hyzer out. So really I'm trying to like do a forced anhyzer angle down the hill, and then it finish with a flare skip left. And with the first run being more stable, that's not hard to trust the disc, and so you see I put it flat to slight annie. The grade of the hill, it carries and drifts, or you see it fight out of that anhyzer into its like pretty hard finish. And the retooled S-line, you see I didn't even put it on the downhill angle as much. I had it flat to slight annie, and even though it was more like straight and not downhill, it still held out for quite a while, and then had again not an aggressive fight into a fade, but more of that swing near the end of the flight path. And you'll see that with the S-line also. That one just drifts right a lot longer, and because it doesn't have as aggressive of a fade, it doesn't really flare skip at the bottom of the hill. It kind of just hits and then dies, which is not good. Just I wouldn't probably use it for this shot. And then the Cloudbreaker 3, put it on a more aggressive low downhill angle, and you see it does not drift as long before fighting out and then having a huge flare skip about 30 feet past the basket. And then we get into this final hole where these trees I'm going to have marked. You want to get there, there's like the landing zone so that you can approach the basket on the right. So you need something that's going to push for quite a while. Those trees are about 450. And so you see with this C-line, I put it on this anhyzer angle. It carries straight for quite a while, and then fights out into the fade, and then has still an aggressive skip at the end despite it being so low to the ground. And on this one I did do another more used first run DD3, and this is an example. That one I did throw it on slight hyzer. It flipped up, carried straight, almost drifting right, and then pushed just as far as the newer first run. And then we get into this retooled C-line. But even despite it being high, it pushed out quite a ways, but it did have enough room to get into a big swinging finish. And so it still finished about the same distance as the first run. And so the retool is just not nearly as stable. And then the S-line, that one was easy to just do a straight hyzer flip up and then let it carry straight all the way to almost those trees before getting into the fade and then skipping off screen there. And the Cloudbreaker 3, but I threw it out right too much, but you can see that even before it hit those trees on the right, it was about to fight out and have this big, huge, hard, faded finish there at the end. And so my overall thoughts, especially regarding how they feel and how they like look and the differences between them and how they fit for me, is that the new S-line has actually become one of my bigger distance drivers because I can flip it up and it still has quite a bit of turn. It's actually more understable than my more stable Enigmas. It has that slight dome, but nothing unexpected. and just feels really good. The S-line plastic's really grippy. I am still a fan of the Cloudbreaker 3s despite what anyone else might have thought. I like the slot it feels being so overstable, and I know other colors like the white and the gray are even more overstable. It doesn't have as much give, and it's not as grippy as the new S-lines, but like these are a bit stiffer. You can hear the pop quite a bit more, but they have a place that I don't think Discmania has another disc for, and maybe those new Horizon Cloudbreakers will fill that spot. But then we get into these C-lines, and the first run that I think everyone experienced and thought one thing about, and then the new retooled ones, whether they said they did that or not, I just found that out from someone that I met that works at Discmania. And so I went home to do a little bit of investigation, and that's where I did find that I could see the difference between these two, because you see the first run, the parting line on the disc is higher than the parting line on the retooled one. For the one where the parting line is higher, that's what makes it more overstable. And so air on the disc is going to pass under it, pushing that right side up on a right hand backhand. And so that's why you see it fight like this way quicker. So anything you guys know or have experienced with them, let me know. Helps me out because I like to throw them, and anything you guys know, I want to know too. So thanks for watching.